Hi, welcome to my show, Autumn is Here. My name is Francine Crawford. Out of the 5 million people who have Alzheimer's, 2/3 of them are women. Out of the 15 million people who care for people with Alzheimer's, 2/3 of them are women. Tonight, we have the pleasure of speaking to a man who has taken care of his grandfather who has Alzheimer's. Let's welcome him to our show. Welcome everybody to my show, Autumn is Here. This evening, we are going to speak to the talented Cletus Kassady. He is a comedian and he is an actor. And he's also was a caregiver to his relative. So we'd like to welcome you to my show. Welcome, Cletus.
Welcome, man. Autumn is here. That's why we're excited. Autumn is a good time of year, man. The leaves are turning brown. It reminds you of a new beginning and all of that, man. Autumn is an awesome month, and the weather, awesome season. And the weather is usually really great in autumn, so we like it, man. Thank you for having me.
Yeah. Well, I'm so glad that you want to be able to come here and tell your story and share your story. Especially happy that that we have a male that has taken care of a loved one that had Alzheimer's. So first, tell me a little bit about yourself.
Man, I don't know. I hate that question. It's one of the questions that I hate the most, man. When people are like, tell me about yourself. I'm really bad at that. I don't know what to do with my hands. I start sweating. So it's one of the reasons why dating never works for me. But I'm a stand-up comedian and actor. I specialize in doing what most people call clean comedy. So I do a lot of churches, corporate events, things of that nature. But I still travel all over the country and do comedy, whether it be in a club, in a church, wherever. I just, maintain the same thing. Also an actor. Just recently got finished filming my first kind of major sitcom, I guess, which will be coming out on the Kev on Stage Studio app this fall. It's called Churchy, and I play the role of Deacon Charles. So that's exciting. But I'm a dad, a father of 2, one child I love, one child that I'm, getting used to. That one's growing on me. Virginia resident, man, been in Virginia most of my life, spent some time in other places, but I'm a Virginia guy, country boy.
Virginia.
Yeah, but that's me in a nutshell, man, if you could fit me in a nutshell.
Oh, okay. Okay. Well, I'm so glad to hear that you have continued your acting career and you've got is that your first feature?
I said major, because I did
major
yours.
Film.
You did.
Oh, okay. Because I was like, big me up a little bit,
I didn't say first. I didn't say my first one. I said major.
Okay.
Not saying that yours was minor, but I do know, where this one's being released and picked up and all that stuff.
It's okay. So I'm just joking.
Yeah. That's why. But no, I definitely did Harmony Gardens. I was definitely in that, your direction and tutelage. So that was great. That was an amazing experience. And to be honest, I gleaned off of that, learned from that experience, even took some of that into what I was doing on this one. The budget was a lot bigger. The things that we were able to do were a lot different than what you all were doing, but still just the fundamentals of it were great.
Oh,
and
good.
I tell people all the time, man, just because it's not a Hollywood production doesn't mean that there isn't Hollywood talent involved. And so you definitely brought that type of a talent from the directorial and writing aspect, man. So it was a blessing to be involved in it, man. And
thank you. Thank you.
Yeah.
Okay. So tonight I wanted to talk about you were a caregiver it was your grandfather?
Yeah, my grandfather, my mother's dad, Edward Cummings, who just a great influence on my life, man. He's probably the most dominant male role figure that I had growing up, because my father wasn't in the home growing up. So my grandfather was who I learned a lot from, and just a lot of who I am is still in me. Like a lot of the habits that he would have, as far as like timeliness, he didn't believe in being late. He was on time for everything. Matter of fact, he was mad early for everything, like those kind of things. Even some of the ways that I have interpersonal relationships are a reflection of me just seeing him and how he was. He was a giver. He was a deacon. Like just a lot of things about him. Those are my biggest influences. So yeah, so dealing with him and his bout with Alzheimer's, and it's funny because, and it's a joke that I do, like everyone always says that somebody else suffers from Alzheimer's. And I was like, I think it's different. I think they are having the ball in the all.
Because they're in their own world.
Yeah, they in their world. We the ones suffering. But when they are my grandfather, like literally, and I think was was a blessing and a curse. Like my grandfather would literally pick the time frame I think that he was happiest in my mind. And that's where he would be. Like he would literally get up and go to work. You know what I'm saying? Or, and I'd be like, man, you retired like 25 years ago. Like, but that's where he would be in his mind. He was getting up, going to work. Right. Or, a lot of times they see my grandmother had passed and he would see my grandmother in people. You know what I'm saying? So like, I really think that a lot of times the mind is there's so much about it that we don't know.
It's amazing. Yeah.
Yeah, but amazing. I think that with the Alzheimer's, like I think a lot of times they go to places where they're happiest. They remember things that they want to remember,
Right. So how did that? How did you feel when you were taking care of him? When you saw that he was changing, he was different. Were you aware of it right away, or?
So no. So here's what happened with my grandfather. I think my grandfather was showing signs of Alzheimer's early. Mm-hmm. And we just took it as old age. I mean, we Southern Black people, we be like, when you get old, you start forgetting stuff. And we was like, man, granddaddy tell that same story over and over again. That's just his story. He loves telling you that story. And it's crazy because I would always be amazed that he would tell that same story to me with the same excitement and vigor as he told me the first time. And I just took it as him just being that good of a storyteller that he could always tell me this same story.
Right.
Like it's the first time each time. But I think to him, it was the first time each time.
Right.
So looking back, retrospect, I saw it, but didn't see it when we were in the moment.
Right.
True story with my grandfather. My grandfather was from a small town called Arkadelphia, Arkansas, just like Philadelphia, just in Arkansas. It's not, but what's what we tell ourselves. So he's from Arkadelphia, Arkansas. He was in the Navy, which is what brought him to Virginia. And he ended up just, getting married and raising his kids, all of that in Virginia. He very rarely got to go home. So at one point we were like, Granddad, let's go home. Like he won't do no plane. Like, but I was grown. My mom was still living at the time. She was, we were able to help with driving. So we were like, Granddad, let's go home. Let's take you down to Arkansas. You haven't been there in 20. He hadn't been since I was a child. So I was like, he hadn't been there since 20-something years. Let's go. My granddad got so excited about going. Instead of renting a car, my granddaddy bought a car. He shows up. I'm at my mom's house. So my granddaddy's lifetime military. He was like, we leaving at 5 a.m. I was like, first of all, Granddad, I don't even get up at 5 a.m. Why are we leaving so early? But he's like, yo, we leaving at 5 a.m. And you just knew that's what my granddaddy wanted to do. So we leaving at 5, which means you had to be ready at 4 because he was showing up at like 4:30. He shows up at my mom's house and I'm like, yo, Granddad, that's a nice rental. He was like, ain't no rental, son. I bought that. I was like, oh, word. And so he was already up in age. So he was like, I'm a driver's there. I'm going to tell you how this is kind of dating the thing. My mom had gone to AAA the night before and got a map. We didn't have GPS at this point. She had got a map done. So they were like, we'll map out the route from Virginia to Arkansas, right? I'm like, okay, this is going to be an adventure. My granddad was like, I don't need no map. Know these streets like the back of my hand. I've been going there since 1950, whatever. And so that was like one of the things, like I didn't get it. I just took it as my grandfather's confidence as a bravado. Like, I don't need no map. Right. We get to going, we on the road. My granddad at this point in time was probably the worst driver in the world. He's swerving. He's all in everybody else lane. We on the interstate. I'm just praying. I'm like, God, give me a way of escape. I can't do this all the way to Arkansas. So I finally was like, yo, Granddad, I got to go to the bathroom bad. We pull over at a McDonald's. And my granddad, for all of his great features and all of his great characteristics, my granddad was a chauvinist without question. Like, he won't let no woman tell him nothing. He won't do it nothing. But if a man told him, he would do it. So we get to the McDonald's. I'm like, Granddad, this is your vacation. You don't need to be driving. Let me chauffeur you. So since I was a male child, he's like, okay, cool. So I ended up getting able to take over and drive. But my granddad just wouldn't let me. He wouldn't want us to look at the map. He's like, you're going to get here. You're going to see a sign. You're going to turn.
Yeah.
Right? So we ended up breaking the trip up in 2 days. We go to Arkansas. Memphis, Tennessee is connected to Arkansas. There's a Memphis, Tennessee and a Memphis, Arkansas. You just cross over a bridge. On one side of the bridge, you're in Tennessee, other side, you're Arkansas. So we get over this bridge. And my granddad said, I remember coming to these fields as a kid, picking peanuts for a penny a pound. Mm-hmm. My granddad, I was like, so in my mind, we close to Arkadelphia. It was still a 3-hour drive from where we were to Arkadelphia. I was like, you ain't walk out here, granddaddy. This ain't this. I don't want to call you a liar, but you ain't walk out here. But that was where his mind, once he got in that area, he really thought he was where he would walk, but it wasn't. It was 3 hours away. We ended up missing turns. It was a lot, but that was the first time that I really, and on that ride, he told me the same stories like 5 times over and over again. So this, when we, later on, I realized he had started losing some of his cognitive ability, but we just kind of chalked it up to him being old. So our biggest fight with him was to gradually take away his independence. He really fought us on that. And he started getting into car accidents or driving places and not knowing where he was. Wow. Yeah. Or where he was going. And like one time he got pulled over, he had run onto he had run his car onto a curb and hopped the curb. The police officer was ready to hit him with a reckless. Matter of fact, the police officer did charge over reckless driving. The police officer was like, do you know where you are? He was like, I'm right here in North Carolina. I'm down the street from the family reunion. My granddaddy was not in North Carolina. He was nowhere near family. All of this was happening. Right. And so we're trying to tell him, granddad, no. And he's like, I'm fine. Like, and on his lucid days, he really was. But then it was the days where he wasn't lucid. And it was like,
it's not all the time.
We don't know which, we don't know which one it was.
You don't know what you're going to get.
He did not. It was a crapshoot every morning. So we ended up having to kind of take his car from him, different things like that, man. And I think me being a comedian kind of helped because, we have a different view of reality anyway. And we can move to different places. I didn't get upset with my granddad about stuff, and I would lie to him. He'd be like, man, that's a nice car you got out there. I'd be like, yeah, granddad, man, I remember back when you had one like that, but that's mine. I'll flip it on him real quick. And I was so convincing that he was all right. I guess that's the actor too. And he would be okay with it and going about his business. Or me and him would argue and in his latter stages, me and him would argue. And I wouldn't even care. I'd just be like, this is part of what it is. You know what I'm saying?
Right.
We would have the argument, but I knew 5 minutes later he won't go. My whole thing with him, I always treated him like a kid. I'm like, granddad, go take a nap. And I knew once he woke up, he wouldn't remember anything that happened before then. Yeah. So that was how I coped.
Was that emotional for you at any time? Like,
I did much better because I was a generation removed than his kids did.
Right.
My uncle's like, I'm not helping. He's like, I can't do it. I can't. He's like, anything y'all need financially, y'all let me know. I'll give you that. I can't be there to see.
He couldn't see it. He couldn't see it.
Couldn't do it.
Right. I get it.
My aunt, it took her. It was real rough on her, but she knew somebody had to help him. And I was the same way. I was like, dog, this is my grandfather. I'm not going to leave him at this point in time. Like, I'm going to be here for him. My mother, I think, had the hardest time because my mother wanted to be involved, but my mother could never deal with my grandfather where he was mentally. My mother would always be like, he know better than that. At this point, it's not even about what he know, but where he is.
Where he's at. You got to meet them where they're at. Yeah.
And she could not. That was the hardest thing for my mom. She would just be so frustrated with him because she'd be like, one day my grandfather had gone to the bathroom in the kitchen. But he thought he was in the bathroom.
Right.
My granddad was just like, I'm in here. I'm going to whip it out and I'm going to go. And my mom was so hot. He's like, he know this ain't the bathroom. I was like, but today he doesn't.
Today he doesn't.
You know what I'm saying? Right. Today, now, in this moment, he really thinks he doesn't know he's in the kitchen. So that was the hardest thing for her. She didn't deal with it very well.
Wow. Well, when you look back and you see what was going on with your grandfather, is there anything that you learned from this experience?
Definitely. So here's what I learned. I did learn that as a caregiver, I think it's much, much harder. And I think the joke that I alluded to earlier is much, much harder on the caregiver than it is on the person that's actually having to deal with it.
Yeah.
So much harder on us. Dealing with my grandfather made me way more open to dealing with other people. It made me so much more patient.
Mm-hmm.
I think that was one of the things that you had to do, was to be patient and also have to almost live in a different reality. Mm-hmm. You almost have to live in, you have to live in the world with them.
Right.
Even if it's just temporary, because fighting it ain't going to help. Right. It's going to make you more frustrated. It's going to make them more frustrated. Now, with my grandfather, I had to put my big boy pants on and really deal with it until he passed. Now, I had an aunt, my great aunt, one of my favorite aunts, and I knew my aunt loved me to death and was really, really tight. And she also dealt with Alzheimer's. And I went to go see her one day. I was like, man, I'm going to go see my aunt. I went and knocked on the door. She asked who it was. I told her who it was, expecting her to give me. She had no idea who I was. So that was for me. And I didn't go back to see her. I was just like, I can't. I can't do it. I was like, at this, I can't love her immensely. I can't do this.
Wow.
And it took me a moment to actually deal with that, to get myself in that place, because I ended up reliving all of this stuff. As a caregiver, I think the thing that I think all caregivers have to do is allow yourself the moments to be emotional. Allow yourself to deal with what was going on. Because what I did was, with my grandfather, I suppressed all of that to do the work that was necessary.
Okay.
My grandfather needs me. I can't deal with the fact that it makes me sad. I can't deal with the fact that this is not my granddad that I used to have. My job now is to be who he taught me to be and raised me to be. Right. So I got to be strong through all of this. And that's what I did. My grandfather eventually, I think the closest time I had to a breakdown was we ended up getting my grandfather a nurse who was there. But before we got him a nurse, we had to spend time taking care of him and being there. You know what I'm saying? Right. I was getting up 4:00 in the morning to go over to my grandfather's house, to sit at the house so that my aunt, who was living there, could get dressed, go to work, and somebody could be there and buffer the time between where she went to work at 6 and the nurse got there at 9. So I would get there. I would get up from my house at 4, go over to his house, be there, let her change. I might fall off. I could hear him when he come out his room. Keep his routine regular. Get up, make him his breakfast, get his breakfast ready for him, get him prepared for the day until the nurse got there. And I was doing that every day. And we didn't have a lot of people who would get in on that rotation because a lot of the family didn't want to do it. So that was the other thing that I learned. Don't expect everybody to be able to deal with it the way that you can.
Exactly. Yeah. We assume that. But it's not necessarily like that. It may not be the person that's the closest or the next of kin or something like that. Everybody can't deal with it. Were you able to? Did you ever see when my mom passed away? They had given us therapy for a year. I never had therapy before, but it was free, so I did it, and it really helped. Did you ever seek therapy? Because you said that you were that person that was you just got up and you did what you had to do. But afterwards, when you knew that he had gone through this and maybe felt that kind of sadness, did you seek therapy or anything like that? Or
I missed out on all of that. So what was really weird was my grandfather had got a nurse. The nurse would take him out on walks. One day on the walk, he fell, hit his head. Right. And we didn't even know it was bad or anything until later off. He just seen off. Good thing was my grandfather was ex-military. He was in the Navy. So whenever we would take him to the Naval Hospital, since there won't no bill, it won't insurance, man, they run every test in the world. You'd be like, look, my foot hurts. They're like, you know what? Why don't we give you an X-ray, CAT scan, pregnancy test? Like, they'll test everything, right? And so he went in, I think, for something different. And they ended up giving him a CAT scan and realized that he had a fracture. He had fractured his skull when he fell. And so he had to have brain surgery. The most troubling time for me. And that was the one day that I had a breakdown, because it was the same day his brain surgery was scheduled on the same day that I was having my son. So my son was being born in one hospital because we had scheduled it. So, and she was going to be, I forget the word now, but
induced.
Induced. Yep. So she was being induced on that day. It was March 6th. He was in one hospital. My grandfather was in one hospital having brain surgery. My son was in another one being born. And so, and he's in his 80s at this time having brain surgery. And I'm being a realist. I'm like, dog, this is not good. Yeah. And all that street stuff starts coming in when they be like, when a baby is born, somebody dies. Like all of this is going through my head that same day. Mm-hmm. So I was just a ball of emotion that day. Mm-hmm. And my aunt, I was like, I'm trying to figure out how to be at the hospital. My grandfather ain't seen my son be born. My aunt is like, dog, be one place. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Just be there. And she like, he would understand. He would know, do what you got to do as a father. So the day that he actually passed was maybe a month after that, a little over a month. He was in a hospital. I had a show in Atlanta. And I flew to Atlanta. I landed. Man, I was getting an award in Atlanta. So I flew to go get the award in Atlanta. I land, get my rental car. I'm driving to get something to eat. My mom calls. She called me from the hospital. And I normally don't answer numbers. But something told me, you know, I'm black. You know, if it ain't a name in the phone, you like, telemarketer, scam likely. But I answered it that day, and it was my mom. And before she could even say anything, I was like, he gone, ain't he? And she was like, yes. And I was like, I need to get back. And my mom was like, okay. Because my mom was just shook up. She was there by herself.
Right.
So I was like, I'm on my way back. I'm like, I'm going back to the airport. She's like, okay, because it's always just been me and her. That's it. I was a single parent. I'm the only child. It was just the two of us. So we always have been each other's strength. And so I was like, I'll be back. I'll be there in a minute. I knew I won't. I was in Atlanta, 8 hours drive. But I called my cousin who happened to be right there. He happened to just be on the street of the hospital at the same time. Called him and said, I need you to go sit with my mom. I'm in Atlanta. I called my aunt. I told her I was on my way back. She was like, don't you dare come home. She was like, you stay down there. You get your award. You work hard. You do what you got to do there. We'll be all right. He's like, if you come back home, he ain't going to be no more alive. And I was like, oh, yeah, well, I guess that makes sense. So that's what I did. But I never did counseling. I just kept on with life. And so I think that when I saw my aunt and her condition, the reason why I couldn't visit is because I hadn't dealt with everything from my grandfather yet. Okay. And I couldn't put all of that. I just was like, yo, I made the choice at that point in time, I'm not going to put all of that together. The counseling probably would have been my best bet. I didn't do any kind of counseling. I had never done any grief counseling until my best friend passed. And so when my best friend passed and I was there with him and all of that, I was just like, you know what? I don't think I'm finna be right. Right. And so my church just happened to be doing like a whole thing on grief counseling. Okay. And we have a psychiatrist that works there. She's like the head of that whole thing. And I was just like, yo, Dr. Scott, I need to holler. And so I did the group one and I was like, yeah, that didn't work for me. And then I started talking to her kind of on like solo. And that helped a lot more. And counseling, listen, get whatever you need to get you to it. Because it's a trauma. Like people don't understand. It's a trauma for us. Because usually it's our parent, grandparent, or somebody who we've built up to be. My grandfather was a Superman to me. He was just that great. And then for him to pass was just a lot.
Wow. Well, now, you know, I know that you've gone through a lot with that. I'm glad that you got therapy, even though it wasn't at that time. But people don't understand how hard it is being a caregiver. And just want to know is there anything else that you would like to say to someone who's a caregiver? Because now you know that they realize that it's so hard being a caregiver. They have support now for caregivers now.
So, right. They'd be like, it's almost like PTSD for caregivers too.
Yeah.
The only thing that I could say to caregivers is don't be afraid to take time away from it. Don't let it completely engulf you. I think one of the mistakes that we all make is that when we become caregivers, we give up the rest of our lives to give the care for that person. And a lot of that is what you end up regretting, that you miss so much of your life because of that. And you feel like you're lost. There are caregivers who, if that person passes away or they're no longer in that caregiver position, they no longer know what to do with their lives.
Right.
Because they've given so much of their life to the caregiving. It is not wrong for you to be like, I'm going to have somebody else sit here and I'm going to go take a moment. Right. It's not wrong for you to be like, you know what, today I can't deal and I'm going to the movies.
Yeah.
There's nothing wrong with that. You are no less of a person. You are not being selfish. And if you are being selfish, it's a positive selfish. You know what I'm saying? Don't be afraid to find, like, we now live in a technology era. Don't be afraid to find caregiver groups of other people who are caregiving, because you're not the only one and you're not alone. You know, there are other people who are dealing with it. They have these experiences. And when you start talking to them, you'll have a whole lot of me too moments of things that you think you're the only one that's dealing with it and you're not. And even if you're caregiving for somebody who cannot say it, they appreciate it. And you are appreciated. And even the family members who didn't help out in ways, they appreciate that you were able to do it. You know what I'm saying? So don't feel like it was work that you're doing that's thankless. You're going to be blessed for it, but that it's an amazing thing that you're doing.
All right. Well, thank you so much for sharing your story, for encouraging others, and just being able to just tell us some detail about it, because everybody goes through it differently. Everybody goes through it differently. I'm sure some people relate to your story, but everybody goes through it differently. And we're just here to share some stories and just let people know, like you said, they're not alone, and what they're doing is a noble job as a caregiver. And, you know, we all going to need help someday from somebody. So if we live long enough, we're going to need some kind of help. So I think
they say once a man and twice a child is what they say. Yeah.
Yes. So thank you so much for taking the time. I appreciate it.
Absolutely. Anything for you, Francine. You call me, I'm there.
Okay. All right. So I hope to see you soon someday on the big screen. Okay.
Yeah, no, listen, it's big. I'm a big guy, so I need a big screen. I appreciate it. When I get my Oscar and my EGOT and all that stuff, I'm gonna be like, it all started with Francine.
There you go. Let them know.
There it is. Absolutely.
All right. Okay. Take care. Good night.
Thank you. All right. Good night.
All right. Bye-bye.